Rashi aspects act like, I see them as acting like rivers or currents. And when you have a planet in a Rashi, and there's a Rashi aspect happening, that current, that energy is carried to the other Rashis. And so let's go ahead and take a look at this chart here. And we'll start with one very simple, because we don't want to get too complicated. Let's look at Jupiter. So we have Jupiter here in Leo. So Jupiter being in Leo, we know that the Rashi aspects that occur with Leo are going to impact the sign that goes right across from it here. We know that it's not going to impact Cancer because this is an active sign right beside it. So it's impacting this active sign, and this active sign. So the energy of Leo is flowing in this direction, it's flowing up here, and it's flowing down here, which means that the benefic experience of Jupiter, that quality of Jupiter, is being carried, and now Jupiter is in a neutral dignity, to the second house. It's being carried to the person's 8th house. It's being carried to their 11th house. Now, what is like a theme or a confluence that we can see with this Jupiter? Well, it's impacting the second house, which does deal with the person's wealth and finances. It's impacting their 11th house, which also deals with their wealth and finances. And it's impacting their 8th house. And we don't often think about the 8th house as a house. We don't often think about the 8th house as a house financially tied. It's not tied financially specifically, but we do know that this deals with the wealth of other people in our lives. It can also be the wealth that we inherit. So all three of these have confluence and agenda that speak to being supported by Jupiter here. And it's not that, you're not looking at Jupiter and trying to get really detailed into the specifics of what Jupiter is about. You're just seeing Jupiter being a planet of grace, good fortune, growth, optimism. Those qualities of Jupiter are flowing into these other areas of the person's life. So therefore, financially speaking, the wealth that they get from other people, the wealth that they get from their side projects and their interests and so on, all of that is going to have this imprint, this stamp from Jupiter. So when you're thinking about Rashi aspects, always keep in mind that there is a flow. It's like you imagine there are these rivers flowing between the signs. And if there's a planet, say the, what do they call that? The part of the river where all the water comes from, the basin. You get the idea. If there is an energy or a quality at the root of the river, then it's going to flow down into the places that it waters, the places that it fertilizes. So that's how you want to look at Rashi aspects. There we go. The quality of Venus's Rashi aspects to other signs depends on the dignity of Venus. The dignity of Venus is defined by its relationship with the house lord, okay? Venus brings the quality of the 10th Taurus and 3rd Libra to 6th house. All right, so if we're looking at that statement, the reason that statement is there is because we're looking at a Leo ascendant. We have Venus ruling Taurus, which is the 10th house, 7, and then we have Venus ruling the 3rd house. And the third and 10th Lord go into the 6th house. All right, making sense, good. Venus brings the quality of 10th Taurus and 3rd Libra to the 6th house. If Venus brings the quality of 10th house, in which Mars resides, to 6th house, 6th house is affected by Mars through both Rashi aspect and house lord relationship. Okay. Why do you say that? Mars is in the 10th. We have a fixed sign impacting an active sign impacting an active sign. Okay, impacting an active sign. All right. So the question is, does Mars have any influence on Venus? Yes, finally. Now I understand. Mars does have an influence on Venus here, but it is not because of an aspect. It's not because of a planetary aspect, right? Mars is not planetarily aspecting Venus. Mars's energy is in Taurus. And remember, let's look at Taurus is the root of the river. And with a Rashi aspect, that river is flowing to Cancer, it's flowing to Libra, and it's flowing to Capricorn. So that means that this quality of Mars, the energy of Mars, is impacting the field of the sixth house. Now, when we have a planetary aspect, that's like two people looking at each other and having a conversation and talking to each other. So there is a specific impact going on between the two planets themselves, almost like a conscious impact going on between the two planets themselves. When we have a Rashi aspect, when the energy of Mars is coming down and impacting the sixth house in which Venus resides, it's not Mars looking at Venus or acting on Venus and saying, we're going to do this, or I'm going to push you around. It's like Mars energy went into the field, and the energy of Mars is fire, let's say, and it burns the field. And now Venus is there. And Venus isn't getting burnt, but it means that Venus is having to grow and act within a field that has been burnt. So it's not a direct experience. It's like a quality has been passed on to that sign, to that house, and that is what Venus has to work with here. So let's think about that a little bit. If we have the 10th Lord in the 6th house and the 3rd Lord in the 6th house, what's that going to tell us? That's going to tell us that this person is going to probably work in some kind of service industry. They're probably going to work probably in a thankless job sometimes, and they're going to bring their Venus to it, which means they're going to bring a sense of poise and grace. And it's good because Venus does good service in this regard. That's what makes Venus a good nurse or able to take care of people. But what is the field? What is the field of the difficulty she's dealing with? Well, it's a burnt field. It's a stressed field. It's a parched field, which means that Venus's service is going to be related to bringing comfort and bringing soothing the burns or soothing the pain that Mars has kind of like shared into that field. So Venus herself is not getting burned. Venus herself is not suffering from the dryness and the heat and the stress of Mars. But Venus is coming into a field that has been stressed by Mars, if you want to look at it that way, and that is what she has to work with. So when we're thinking about this, there are influences there, but there are different degrees of influence and different kinds of influence. Now, on the other hand, is Mars being impacted by Venus? Well, Mars is being impacted by Venus because Mars is in the sign in the house of Venus. Again, in that situation, that's not Mars having a lovely Venus coming up to him and giving him a massage and feeding him wonderful food and taking care of him. That's Mars has gone into Venus's house. And Venus, because of who Venus is, probably has a house that's well stocked, that's well maintained, that is extremely comfortable to be in. So Mars is getting the benefit of Venus, not because Venus is actively doing something, but because Mars is residing in the house of Venus. Just like you can go into your friend's house. And when you go into your friend's house, you will have access to pretty much everything your friend has access to because it's his house. So this is where it gets really interesting in regards to all the different kinds of influences you can have between Rashis and signs and planets and so on. All right. Now, one more question from the emails that have been sent to me, and then we will dig into the few that I see here in the chat box.